When something big is happening, a movement, a moment, a mission that could change the world, you want to be ready. You want to learn everything you can. And right now, something big is happening. He Gets Us is a multi-year national campaign to raise the respect and relevance of Jesus in our culture. It's starting conversations, it's grabbing attention and changing minds. It's all over Twitter, in Times Square, on billboards and in stadiums. And on February 12th, you'll see it on the biggest stage in America. You'll see Jesus in the Super Bowl. The conversation is starting. Are you ready for it?
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. This is one of those moments where it's just truly special, whether you're here in person, whether you're online. It's a holy moment. You could have, as Ben said in the announcements, you could have been everywhere. You could have been anywhere, I should say. And there is a big game that's going on, a really big game. A game that, in fact, 1 in 4 households in the United States right now are watching the game that's kicking off in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, they say it's going to kick off in 5 minutes. It's actually not going to kick off for over 20 minutes, and so I promise, if you are a football fan, we'll get you out close to on time, and most of you have DVR anyway, so you can watch it, but this game that's on the Super Bowl that's going to be on in 1 in 4 houses, it's the biggest sporting event in the United States. In the United States, it's bigger than the World Cup in the United States. Not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than the World Series, the NBA Finals. It's bigger than the Olympics. This game is a game that's captivating so much so that you've heard, like, commercials within the Super Bowl are millions and millions and millions of dollars for 30 seconds. And as you saw in that clip, that preview of a commercial that's going to be played 2 times. 2 times in the Super Bowl, this commercial is going to be played. Why? Because people need to know something. People need to be invited. I don't know if you've seen the He Gets Us campaign that's been taking over. It's popping up everywhere, and it's done, to my conviction, it's done so incredibly well. It's done in a way that's loving. It's done in a way that's grace-based. It's done in a way that's not making people feel like they're being condemned or guilted or threatened. And it's done very intentionally that way. As a way to say, hey, there is a God who came into this world in flesh, this Jesus who came and he gets us. He understands us. He comes alongside of us. He's experienced life so similar. It doesn't matter what age in which it was that he lived. He understands the experiences that we have. There are people who donated the money to get this commercial in the Super Bowl. $20 million. And people would say, well, yeah, isn't there a better way that you could spend that money? I don't know if there's a better way that you could spend that money. Because I wonder how many hearts are going to be opened, because everybody knows that you watch the Super Bowl more for the commercials than you do the game, unless your team is playing. Somebody told me today, they said, oh, we get it, you wouldn't preach the Super Bowl if the Vikings were playing. Actually, I would. Because this is the place where I hang out. So glad to be here. Am I going to watch the game? Absolutely. But what's going on tonight, what's going on even during the Super Bowl, it's much bigger than a game. If you were to look at 2 of the centerpieces of tonight's game, it's the Chiefs against the Eagles. The Chiefs are the AFC team. I just really don't like Chiefs fans right now because they've been to the AFC Championship, the game that comes before the Super Bowl, 5 years in a row. My team's been there like twice in my lifetime. And they're led by Patrick Mahomes, who knows that it's so much more than a game. Patrick Mahomes is squaring off against the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, whose name is Jalen Hurts, who knows that it's so much more than a game. And they're very vocal about it. They don't shy away from it. They're very forthcoming. In fact, people in their locker rooms will talk about the fact that these guys don't lead just with motivation. These guys lead with faith and with grace. Jalen Hurts, in his college career, he started out at Alabama, and Alabama, that's like a football factory. The greatest college for collegiate football. I mean, they're churning out more professional athletes into the NFL than any other team right now. They're on top of the heap, if that's the way that you want to look at it. But when Jalen Hurts was in college, he was this well-known, he was going to be the star, but he had a really up and down season. And for Alabama, up and down season means that you might lose a game. Can you imagine the pressure to be a part of a team that if you lose a game, you're now looked at as being as a disappointment? And so this guy knows that if he has one bad game, that people are going to start to question not just his athletic ability, but his worth as a human being. Now, look, I love sports more than probably anybody else in the world, as much as anybody else in the world. But I think that kind of pressure it's just silly. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous. But Jalen Hurts, his senior year, they start getting close to the national title game, and he has a bad game, and he's replaced by a guy that is now the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa. And so then now it's going to be the fact that he's not going to be able to be the quarterback for the national championship game, and it looks like the fact that he's not going to be the quarterback going forward. And so reporters asked Jalen Hurts, they said, well, how do you get through something like this? And Hurts said, if it was just me doing it on my own, I don't know how I could get through it and the pressures that I face. But because my identity is set in Jesus Christ, I have nothing but love for this program. I have nothing but love for this guy that's going to take my position. And I know that I'm going to be fine because it's not football that tells me who I am. It's Jesus. Patrick Mahomes talks about how everything in his life is based on his identity that's found in Jesus Christ, who leads different various Bible studies on his team, who over the course of the last few weeks, if you're a football fan, you know that he's been battling an injury that usually will shelf somebody for almost 6 to 8 weeks at times, a high ankle sprain that impacts your ability to move laterally, and he is the best lateral moving quarterback in the game. And they asked him, like, what are you going to do if you can't play in the game? He said, I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be a spectator. I'm going to cheer my team on. Because it's not football that defines me, it's Jesus. And if you've been paying attention, if you're following it at all, there is an incredible movement that's happening in the professional sports culture of the United States. That's very good. There are young men and young women who are in the sports scene that are starting to share the same message that commercial is going to share this evening. And they're using their platform to allow people to know that there's something bigger that you have the opportunity and the invitation to look for. And tonight, I just think about it, that there are going to be millions of people who are watching who are all looking for something. Who might tonight be, if you're a Philadelphia fan, which if you're a Philadelphia fan, I got a little bit of a problem with you because you kill my team all the time. Or if you're a Kansas City fan, which there are a lot of them in central Iowa, so many that it's a little bit nauseating. Like, I get it, you're good, that's fine, you don't have to tell me about it all the time. But who are going to start to wonder if maybe the results of this evening's game is going to be able to give them whatever it is that they're looking for. Or maybe it's not football that is the place that you're looking for whatever the something is that you need. But we're all looking for something, aren't we? And what gets to define that for you? What gets to decide that for you? Like who you are and what's your potential and what are the opportunities and what's your worth and what's your identity. This is central to who we are as human beings. These are fundamental questions that all of us, we wrestle with. Whether we're very young or whether we're not so young anymore. It's the questions that seem to follow us no matter what age or what stage of life that we find ourselves in. And this is exactly what's going on as we get to this part of the Gospel of Mark, as we continue on in this walk that we're doing through the whole Holy Bible. that I hope you're continuing to kind of continue on with. And if you haven't been doing it, jump in. There's bookmarks out in the atrium. If you're online, there's places on our website that you can find the daily Bible readings. You can do just the New Testament, or you can do the New and the Old Testament. If you do just the New Testament, it literally is probably not more than about 5 to 6 minutes of reading a day. We have a podcast that comes out every morning, and it will actually have it read to you. That's what I've been doing this year. I've read through the Bible multiple times, and because we have this podcast that's being done from people inside Hope, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to listen to it. And so that's what I do every morning. And everybody's sleeping because I'm an early riser, so I put my earbuds in and I just listen to the Bible. It's amazing. So we read through Matthew last month, and now for last week, this week, and next week, we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark. And Mark is a fascinating book. It's a fascinating read. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they're called the Synoptic Gospels. It means that they follow the life of Jesus, and the story is told very similarly. If you've been reading along, many of you have read through Matthew, now you're in Mark, and you're like, it seems like they're telling the same story. Why would you have two people tell the same story? Well, they tell it differently, and they have different people in mind as they tell it. When I was in seminary, one of the things we had to do is we had to take one of the synoptic gospels. So we had to spend an entire semester studying either Matthew, Mark, or Luke. Well, I'll just be completely honest. I took Mark because it was the shortest. Like, it's almost half the length. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to take Mark, and it's going to be easier because it's shorter. And I couldn't have been more wrong. In fact, my very first day in that class, Dr. Skinner was my professor, and he said, I know that there are probably somebody in this class who took it because it's the shortest gospel. And I'm like, how did he know that I was, like, that was me? And he said, but sorry to break it to you, this one is incredibly rich and deep. Where Matthew and Luke will tell you the story, Mark shows it to you. As you go through Mark's gospel, he uses words like immediately, and while they were doing that, there's this cadence and this rhythm that it almost feels as you're reading the gospel of Mark, like it almost feels like you're out of breath. That you're like, whoa, you need to slow down. Like this is just so much. But Mark is telling the story, is sharing the events of Jesus in such a way because what he knows is not just the people who encountered Jesus, but the people who would hear the account of Jesus' life, which includes you, would be looking for the thing that would satisfy their soul. What's that for you? There are really some incredible ways that we look to do this. Wonderful things. Like long walks outside in nature. Quiet time, meditate, all of these things. But is it enough? Or do you maybe find yourself in a place where you just wish that things would slow down enough so you could finally kind of just feel as if you're going to catch up? Just before the reading that was read just a few minutes ago, this is what was happening with Jesus and his disciples. And the crowds are big. I mean, by this time in Mark's gospel, we've seen Jesus as he's encountered so many different people with so many different things, and it doesn't matter where he goes, it seems that people are following him, and it just doesn't seem as if he'll let anybody pass by without them having what they need be met. Which I hope you're catching that as well. And I know some of us have prayers and we have longings, we have all of these things that we wonder whether if or not Jesus is going to meet that need. He always does. It doesn't always happen in our time frame, and there are mysteries and things that we just don't know, but God's always good on his promise. But Jesus had been going, so so hard that he gets to a point where he says to his disciples that it's time to go get some rest. And his disciples have to be thinking like, thank God, Jesus, you. Thank God, because we need to get away from the crowds. We need to find some time where we can replenish our own spirits. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the crowds have a way of finding out where Jesus is going. And so while they think that they're going out to a remote place where no one else is going to be, the crowds of people who are all searching for something. That's why they're there. They have something that they're not able to get, and they've heard all about Jesus, and they believe that He is the one that can give them that. And so Jesus looks on to the people. Gospels say that there are 5,000 men that are there. It's how they took accounts of people. So it's safe to assume that if it's just 5,000, counting the men alone, that if you would bring in the children and the women that were there, that the crowd is at minimum, 15,000 people. Maybe upwards of 20,000 people. But they've all gathered just to hear what it is that He's going to say and what it is He's going to teach, and maybe that they could have an opportunity to have an encounter with Him. So Jesus sees them and He has compassion on them. He sees the needs that exist, and so He starts to teach them, and all of a sudden the disciples start freaking out. Because if Jesus has been meeting their needs and they've been there for a while, now they're going to expect that maybe He's going to satisfy their hunger. So the disciples see this happening, and they go to Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, hey, there's a little bit of a problem. And Jesus is like, well, what's the problem? Jesus, there's a lot of people here, and there's no place for us to get what it is that we need. And if they can't get what it is that they need, they're going to look at you, and what are you going to give them? So you have to send them away. Send them. Tell them to go home. Tell them if they want to come back tomorrow, they can come back tomorrow. But tell them to go, because we don't have the ability, the capacity to provide for the needs that exist in their lives. But Jesus, well, He has a different idea than what the disciples do. Take a look.
The kingdom is so valuable that once you have glimpsed it, it's worth parting with everything you have in order to gain it.
We shouldn't burden him.
Even though to others you might look like a fool, throwing away your life savings to buy what would look to others an unremarkable field. But you know of the hidden treasure. That makes it worth everything. Have you come closer to hear better?
No, there is an issue.
My friends, if you'll excuse me, I must speak with my students a moment.
Rabbi, people are out of food. Some have been without food for days, others have traveled a great distance.
So, give them something to eat.
We're out of food. They're out of food.
Is it time to send them home?
Well, at this point, they're so hungry and tired, if we send them home, they'll faint along the way.
You knew they were hungry.
Yes, Judas. I can see them while I'm talking. Well, this is a tough one. Where can we buy some bread for all these people?
We only came with a little over 200 denarii. Rabbi, that's not even enough to get a little bit for everyone. I wouldn't even know how to calculate that.
Matthew and I can calculate that. That's really easy.
Maybe if we go into the cities, we can negotiate something on credit.
Yes. Yes, that could work.
Negotiate with whom? The closest city is Abila, and its entire population is here.
Can you bring me anything? Surely there's some food from someone, even a small amount.
5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But what is this for so many?
Barley loaves.
2 fish and 5 barley loaves. Thank you for clarifying.
This is humiliating.
John? He will take care of it if he wants to.
This is wonderful bread, Telemachus.
I know it's not enough.
Oh, it's enough for me. I can do a lot with this.
That clip there is taken from the 3rd season of a show called The Chosen. We've used it quite a bit. It's done really well. This episode just came out. It's brand new. And I was watching that episode just this past week because I heard that The Chosen covered the feeding of the 5,000. And it's done better than any other of the shows that I've ever seen to do this scene. Just a little fast fact. They had 12,000 extras to film that scene. Can you believe that? 12,000 people from 36 different countries, all 50 states. There's somebody from all 50 states. The age range of people in that scene were from 7 weeks old to 91 years old. Like they did the best they could to try to represent the enormity of what it was that Jesus and his disciples were facing. You could see it on their face. Like, what are we going to do? And Jesus says, well, you got to feed them. And they're like, no, Jesus, they have a hunger that we can't satisfy. And here's the thing, why this story means so much is we live in a world that's hungry, don't we? I just think about just this past week. I think about the earthquake in Turkey and Syria and how devastating that is. I mean, well over 25,000 people have lost their lives. And you think about all the families who are mourning the loss. It's so tragic that this is an area of the world that's not predominantly Christian. And just this last week, I heard somebody say that, well, because they're not Christian, maybe that's not our responsibility. My goodness. So we have containers outside the worship center that if you want to give to people who are impacted by the earthquakes the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, we would love to funnel that money directly to people who are on the ground. And every penny of that goes directly to the people who are impacted. But it's not just the tragedy of natural disaster, it's the reality of people who don't have enough food to know where their next meal comes from. 1 in 9 kids in Iowa are uncertain of where their next meal is going to come from. And with the reality of facing inflation the way that we have, that number is growing. That this isn't a big city problem. This isn't a in the city problem. This is a in our community problem. In fact, there's probably people who are either worshiping in person or online right now that know all too well the reality of what it feels like to live life not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. It's not just that, it's the divisiveness. It's the seeming lack of goodwill that we have towards one another. We live in a world that's just so hungry, but it's not just the world, is it? It's all of us. We all hunger for something. Just this last week in our community, Colette, our director of care ministry, I think it was on Wednesday. It was Wednesday. I looked over here because Colette's over here. We had 3 different families who were impacted by suicide in our community. And that's just so sad on so many different levels. That a lot of, especially young people, are in a place where they feel so lost that they don't know where they could go to get help, to find hope. And it's so easy to look at the world. It's so easy to look at ourselves and to think that we don't have what it takes to get and to give them what they need. But that's why God sends you. I mean, you heard Jesus say to his disciples are like, you got to send them away because we don't have anything. Did you hear what Jesus said? Jesus didn't say, hey, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Jesus said, no, you feed them. And I can't imagine what they were thinking. I can't imagine, like, they're probably thinking, like, you are going to make us look like fools. You feed, what with what? Is literally what their response was. Jesus says, you feed them. They're like, with what? We don't have anything. Jesus, we came to a remote place. We came here just to satisfy what it is that we might need. And we have enough for ourselves to get through today, but we don't have enough to get 20,000 people. And isn't it interesting sometimes how easy it is to slip? And it's not like it's a bad thing. The disciples were wonderful human beings who just had the tendency to minimize what God could do through them. And so Jesus, his response to the disciples who say, we don't have anything, you know what he said to them? He says, just give me what you have. And I think about this is the church. This is us. We look at a world that's hungry. We look at like individuals who are hungry, who aren't just hungry physically for food, but are hungering for something deeper that will satisfy their soul. And Jesus says, you feed them. And we're like, I don't have what it takes. And Jesus says, you don't have to have it, but just give what you have to me and see what happens. So that's what Jesus does. They're like, Jesus, we only have 5 loaves of bread. We only have 2 fish. And Jesus says, well, just look at what I can do with that. Take a look.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth.
Did they find some bread?
If they've got bread, be ready. We'll probably be first.
Feed them. What has changed? Are we...
Organize the people into groups of 50 and 100. Gather up 12 baskets to distribute the loaves and fish. Was I unclear?
No. This feels familiar. Maybe. Let's go.
Does anyone have a basket? Please borrow a basket. Anyone? Oh, you? Please.
Come on.
Yes, it's important. Yes, over here.
Feed them.
Anyone?
Yes.
Anyone have a basket? Anyone? You. Break up the bread. Okay. How many do we have? How this is gonna work?
There, you take some. There.
Worth the try.
Just need some.
Give me some of that.
That's the last of it. Yeah, that's the last of it. All right, Marcus, you can have your basket back.
Basket. Look. Is your basket full? You see this?
Here's what I love about this story, and why I think it means so much to us, is we get so concerned with the what. Think about this. Think about your own life. We get so concerned about the what that we forget about the who. We get so concerned about the what we have or what we don't have that we forget about the who and the people who are desperately in need of what it is that we could possibly give them. Not on our own. Because what God says is he says, just give me what you have because I'm the one who gave it to you. Some years ago, one of my best friends, he and I just met. We met because our sons were in the same preschool class. He's become one of my great friends, and he and I were having a conversation. He works in a business. He owns part of the business, and he said to me one day, he said, Jeremy, I got to figure out what God wants to do and what God could do with me because this is just what I do, and what he does, I think it's amazing. And I looked at him and I said, hey man, I couldn't do that. And he said, well, I feel like for me to be used by God, I got to go off and do something else. And I said, why do you think that? Why do you think? And he said, well, I just do what I do. And I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, anybody can do this. I said, no, they can't. I said, you got to look different. You got to think differently about who you are and about what you have and about what God has gifted you with. You're so concerned with the what that you forget about the who. And maybe the way in which that God could feed the multitudes through you is happening and could happen exactly where it is that you find yourself. Think different. God says, give me what I gave you and see what it happens, because you and I and this whole world, we have something to give. God didn't mess up. God put the body of Christ just together in just the way he wanted it to, so that every part, when they started to work together, would be a fully functioning body that would be able to accomplish exactly what God needs it to accomplish, not based on our own, but based on the God who has brought us together. Jesus reversed the thought process of the disciples. He said, you don't worry about the what, you just go and move out to the who. I'll take care of whatever it is. I am the God who provides. I provided for your people when they were in the wilderness for 40 years, and I gave them more than enough every day. Don't worry about the what. I have the what covered. You just move out to the who. You just move. So the disciples, they bring the 5 loaves of bread, they bring the 2 fish to Jesus, and he takes the bread and he blesses it. He marks it. He marks it as holy. And he says, God, this is yours, and we're going to use it for your glory. And God, there's a whole lot of people here. And God, we believe that you can do what it is that you need to do. And so then he takes the bread and he takes the fish and he gives it to the disciples, and he tells them to go out. And this is the hardest part, because we can all agree on everything up until this point. But now he says to the disciples, okay, take your baskets and go out. And I wonder all of the hesitancy that was involved in each of them. Think about what we're doing as a church. This time of year, the amount of food insecurity as the season of giving has passed. And food shelves are at an all-time low, especially this year with the cost of food being so high. And how easy it would be for us to say, well, I couldn't possibly take care of all of that on my own. You don't need to. You don't have to worry about the what. Just keep in your heart and your mind the who, the people who need it. And look what happens. I mean, if you're online, you'll see pictures on social media. The response so far, it's overwhelming. It's mind-blowing. And it's not done. You say, oh, it's Sunday night. I haven't gotten my stuff yet. You still can go. Go tonight. Just DVR, hit play a little bit later. Go tomorrow morning. Bring it back. Trust us. If you bring it, we'll distribute it. If you're online, bring it to your local food pantry. If you're watching this sermon 3 weeks from now, you're like, oh, I missed the window. Call your local food pantry. Say, hey, can I bring you some food? I guarantee you they will say yes. So the disciples, they take the courage to start to walk out, and this is where the scene, it it goes from a mission and it moves to a party. It's a glimpse of heaven. Because that's what happens when we start to walk in the confidence of a God who promises when we move to the who, he'll give us whatever it is that we need. Take a look.
I've kept you here all this time giving you spiritual food. But you clearly need actual food now. So let's eat.
That's my favorite right there. You literally can't believe it. What am I a part of? I'm just me, and I just got to be here, and now we're feeding the people, and there's leftovers. There is more than enough. And imagine how that, I mean, yes, it impacted the multitude. But think about it, what it did for the disciples. They saw physically how little they had and how much they needed. And somehow God worked a miracle through them. Look, you're no different. God's given you more than enough to feed Central Iowa, but also to feed the hungry people in your community, because God can do infinitely more through you than you could ever imagine. Infinitely more. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you think you're good at or what you think you're not good at. God says, don't worry about the what, just worry about the who. See the people who are in need and go and love them. Just love them. Love them in a way that's tangible. Love them in a way that can be felt. Love them in a way that can be experienced. And I'm going to continue to give you more than enough. So it starts with food. Doesn't mean that we ignore the food. It starts with food. And so I want to encourage you. Don't miss out on being a part of this act of God. You say, oh, this isn't a miracle. This is just a bunch of people bringing. That's a miracle. It's a miracle. That this many people would give this much in an economy like that, that's miraculous. And you get to be a part of it. So don't miss it. But don't just let it just be groceries for you. There's a big game on, and it gives us a big opportunity to be a part of really big things. But that can happen every day. So as we get ready to go and hit play on our DVRs, I invite you to stand. I invite you to stand up, and we're going to sing a song, and then we're going to go home. No, we're going to go to the grocery stores, and then we're going to go home, and then we're going to watch the game or not watch the game. You're here Sunday night at 5 p.m., you're probably not going to go watch the game, but I'm going to. So enjoy it. But give God praise that you're part of a miracle. Don't ever underestimate it. To be a part of what God's doing, it's miraculous. Amen.